Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, I'm Olivia. Every month I cover a mystery that I would love to see solved. This mystery is about the identity of a serial killer who wreaked havoc on New Mexico, who took the lives of at least 11 women, and who could be loose right now: the West Mesa bone collector. It all began outside Albuquerque, New Mexico, a sleepy southwestern city of 500,000 people, where the rate of violent crime is more than double the national average, and where the desert can hide a lot of sins. The West Mesa is a high plateau that rises over the Rio Grande. Parts are nothing but desolate dry sand and tumbleweeds, while others are filled with subdivisions. Or at least lots that were going to be subdivisions before construction halted on them due to housing prices falling in the mid-2000s, which eventually led to the collapse of the American housing market bubble in 2008. It was in one of these empty dirt lots that a woman walking her dog on February 2nd, 2009, stumbled upon a human femur sticking up from the dirt. Unfortunately, it was only the first of many bones that were to be found in what would become Albuquerque's crime of the century, known officially as the 118th Street homicides. It took the Albuquerque police weeks to uncover all the bodies, which were scattered across a 92-acre swath of land, and a year to identify all the victims. In total, 11 women and a fetus were found buried in the West Mesa. Many of them had been missing for years. However, this was not the first time that the issue of missing women had been brought to the attention of the police. In 2007, 2 years before the bones were found, an Albuquerque reporter had discovered that the city's only missing persons detective had compiled a list of 16 sex workers who had gone missing between 2001 and 2006. This should have alerted authorities to at least the possibility there was a serial killer, but it was almost completely ignored. Eventually, 9 of those women were found in the West Mesa boneyard. The whereabouts of the other 7 remain unknown. It seems because many of the women who disappeared were involved in drugs and sex work that they didn't get a lot of attention from the police or the media, who deemed them unworthy to investigate, which is reducing someone down to their job or an addiction rather than treating them like a human being. And it's what allows killers to stay active when no one is searching for these people. All of the victims found were women between the ages of 15 and 32, and most were Hispanic. The women had gone missing between 2001 and 2005, years before the bodies were uncovered. 10 out of the 11 victims were known sex workers and believed to be involved in drugs, a fact that police pointed out early and often, as though that made it okay that these women were victims. The only one who wasn't a sex worker was 15-year-old Jamie Barella, whose body was the last to be identified. She was last seen in 2004, having gone to the park with her 23-year-old cousin, Evelyn Salazar, whose remains were also discovered at the West Mesa 2 months prior. In addition to Barella, investigators discovered the remains of another 15-year-old girl named Cylania Edwards, a runaway from Lawton, Oklahoma. She was the only African-American victim and the only one with ties outside of New Mexico. Monica Candelaria was 21 when she went missing. Her family described her as a happy person, always laughing and joking. Reportedly, when the sheriff's deputies investigated her disappearance in 2003, friends of hers said that she had been killed and buried on the mesa, but nothing ever came of that. The case remained cold until the discovery of her bones. Virginia Cloven was 23. She was a runaway from home but had kept in contact with her parents, who reported her missing in October of 2004. Her parents said that they kept the same phone number all those years, hoping she would call. Julie Nieto was 24, had a son, and was involved in drugs and sex work. She had last been seen by her family in August of 2004 and was reported missing shortly after that. Sadly, after she went missing, her sister, who struggled with the grief of losing her since they were incredibly close, died of a drug overdose. Their mother said, quote, "She couldn't handle it. She was depressed all the time, crying all the time. That was the only sister she ever had." Victoria Chavez was 26. She was the mother of 2 children. She also had issues with drugs and was out on probation for sex work. Chavez's mother reported her missing in March of 2005 after she hadn't been seen for more than a year. Doreen Marquez, was 27 and had 2 daughters. She didn't have any sex work arrests like many of the other girls, but it's still believed she engaged in it. Veronica Romero was 27 when she was reported missing by her family on Valentine's Day in 2004. The fetus they found was from 22-year-old Michelle Valdez, who had been 4 months pregnant. She was the mother of 2 other children, was an older sister, and had loving parents, but drugs had increasingly taken over her life. She was reported missing in February of 2005. Her family worried about her for years. She was classified as a missing person whose case wasn't being actively investigated. Her mother said, quote, "She was a very fun-loving girl. She always had a smile on her face, and she would just brighten up a room with her bubbly personality. Everybody has faults, and hers was drugs, but she was still a human being." There's nothing that really ties all these victims together other than the fact that they were all found in the same area and that they led what police refer to as high-risk lifestyles. Police believe they were all buried by the same person or persons, and that it's most likely a serial killer who has become known as the West Mesa Bone Collector. Investigators assembled a team of detectives, brought in FBI profilers, and worked with law enforcement agencies across the state. However, now it's been more than a decade, and there's still no official suspects. But, to be fair, there's not a lot to go on. There's virtually no forensic evidence despite there being bodies. Police haven't been able to discover a killer's DNA at the burial site. There were bones, but they didn't reveal how the women died. The official cause of death is homicidal violence, though investigators do suspect it was strangulation, and nobody has come forward as a witness. Satellite images taken between 2003 and 2005 showed tire marks and disturbed soil in the area where the bodies were discovered, but by 2006 that was either buried over or disturbed due to the encroachment of residential developments. In July of 2018, a construction crew discovered more human remains near the original discovery site, but the State Office of the Medical Examiner quickly determined that they were likely old Native American bones unrelated to the disappearances. Over time, a number of men have attracted police attention, though no one has ever been charged. Fred Reynolds was a pimp who knew one of the missing women and had photos of missing sex workers, but he could never be fully investigated because he died of natural causes in January of 2009. In December of 2010, convicted serial killer Scott Lee Kimball was being investigated for the murders. He's believed to have killed 4 people between January of 2003 and August of 2004 when he was out of prison acting as an FBI informant. Only 3 of the bodies were ever recovered, but they were in remote Colorado and Utah locations. He allegedly regularly visited Albuquerque between 2002 and 2005 for work. He boasted to his friends that he had murdered more people, and he was rearrested in 2006, roughly the same time that the West Mesa killings stopped. Though he has denied killing the West Mesa women, he is currently serving a 70-year sentence at the Colorado State Penitentiary. Joseph Blee caught the attention of investigators almost immediately. 7 days after the first bone was found in West Mesa, his first wife called police and said, "Yeah, I think you should look into him." How bad do you have to be if your wife thinks you're a serial killer and tells the police about you? But I guess it's not a huge stretch. Since 2015, he's been serving a 36-year prison sentence for sexual assaults that he committed in the 1980s. He is known as the mid-school rapist because he would break into the homes of 13 to 15-year-old girls who lived near the McKinley Middle School in Albuquerque and rape them. Blee was also known to pick up sex workers and was also suspected by police of killing a sex worker in 1985. His DNA was on a dead woman found on Central Avenue, a notorious street for sex work in the eastern part of the city. There's also the fact that inside his home was jewelry that did not belong to his wife or daughter and a large collection of women's underwear in his shed. Additionally, a tree tag from an Albuquerque nursery was found in the area where the West Mesa victims' bodies were buried. Blee, who was a landscaper, frequented that nursery. Though the primary suspect is Lorenzo Montoya, who lived less than 3 miles from the burial site and had a history of soliciting sex and violence against women. In 1999, Vice detectives saw him pick up a sex worker, followed him to a dark, dead-end road near the airport before they intervened. He only had $2 in his wallet, so he never planned to pay her. Police believe they caught him before he was going to rape and strangle her. He was arrested, but the case was later dismissed. In December of 2006, Montoya strangled and killed 19-year-old Sharika Hill, a sex worker he had met in an online chat room. When Hill never came out of the trailer, Frederick Williams, who claimed to be her boyfriend, followed Montoya to his house. He found Montoya trying to move her body. She was partially wrapped in a blanket, her wrists and ankles were bound in duct tape, and there was a thick layer of duct tape around her neck. He shot and killed Montoya, and after that, the disappearances stopped. Although some of these suspects look really promising, it's completely possible that the killer isn't even on this list. Maybe the reason the killing stopped isn't because he's in prison or he died, but because the killer moved and is now murdering women somewhere else. The women who are still missing and believed to be connected to the bone collector are 20-year-old Anna Vigil, who went missing on January 20th, 2005, 23-year-old Felipa Gonzalez, who went missing on April 7, 2005, 21-year-old Nina Herron, who went missing on May 14, 2005, 29-year-old Chantel Waits, who went missing on March 15, 2006, 23-year-old Leah Peebles, who went missing on May 22, 2006, and 24-year-old Vanessa Reed, who went missing on June 13, 2006. The similarity between the known victims and these women leave the question, are these also victims of the West Mesa bone collector? Does the killer have other burial sites? And is the killer still out there? The hope now is that someone somewhere knows something and will come forward with the truth. Since this is an open investigation, anyone with information regarding the missing women or the West Mesa murders can call the Albuquerque Police Department's 118th Street Task Force or Crime Stoppers. And that is the story of the West Mesa bone collector. And if you'd like to hear more stories like that, please subscribe.